Welcome to the Behind Story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a crazy story. Let's jump right in. The first thing I noticed when I stepped outside wasn't the warmth of the sun or the slight breeze rustling the trees. It was the stranger lounging in my backyard. She sat there, completely at ease, her designer sunglasses reflecting the sky as she reclined on my lawn chair, sipping from a cup that most definitely did not belong to her. My hat and sunscreen had been tossed aside onto the grass, as if they were nothing more than debris standing between her and her personal paradise. And in my pool, a child splashed joyously, completely oblivious to the fact that he was trespassing. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe the heat was playing tricks on me. Maybe I'd woken up in some strange alternate reality where private property no longer existed and entitlement had been upgraded to a legally binding privilege. Then the woman, this absolute stranger, looked up at me with a placid smile, as if I were the intruder here, and not the other way around. "Oh," she said, adjusting her sunglasses like she was preparing for a minor inconvenience. "Is this your property?" I blinked. My brain short-circuited for a moment. Was this my property? Was she seriously asking me that? "Yes," I said slowly, my voice already carrying the sharp edge of disbelief. "This is my backyard. That is my pool." I gestured at the child, who was happily floating on a pool noodle that had definitely been inside my storage box this morning. "And that is my pool toy." The woman, Karen, because at this point, what else could she be, waved a dismissive hand like I was bringing up an irrelevant technicality. "Well, my son wanted to swim, but the lake was too cold." She smiled, as if that settled the matter, as if that was a perfectly logical explanation for breaking and entering. I stared at her. Was she insane? "That still doesn't explain why you're here, on my property, using my pool." My voice was flatter than the calm before a hurricane. Karen sighed, the put-upon, exaggerated kind of sigh people give when they feel they're being so patient with an unreasonable child. "You don't have to be so rude about it," she said, lowering her sunglasses to pierce me with a condescending stare. "I'm just trying to keep my son happy." That was it. That was her entire justification. Her kid wanted something, and therefore she was entitled to it. I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to laugh in sheer disbelief. "Well, I'm sorry, but I don't let random strangers use my stuff." Karen pursed her lips. "You shouldn't be so selfish. There's plenty of room, and we're not hurting anything. Plenty of room. Not hurting anything." I took a moment to digest the absurdity of it all, the sheer audacity dripping from every word. My gaze flicked to the child, still splashing happily, completely unaware that his mother was trying to gaslight a grown man into thinking trespassing was some kind of moral obligation. I turned back to her. "No, you need to leave. Now." She stiffened. "Excuse me?" I pointed at the gate. "Get out before I call the cops." And that was when the mask slipped. Gone was the falsely sweet smile, the entitled casualness, her face twisted with indignation, her nostrils flaring as she stormed to her feet. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she shrieked, voice grating like nails on a chalkboard. "My son has feelings, you know." "Do you really want to be the kind of heartless monster who kicks a child out of a pool?" "A child, for God's sake." I stared at her, dumbfounded. Was she seriously trying to guilt-trip me for wanting my own property back? Apparently, yes. because she wasn't done. If he gets out now, he could go into shock from the temperature change, she accused, jabbing a finger toward me. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want my baby to get sick because you're too selfish to share? It took every ounce of restraint. I had not to laugh in her face. Instead, I turned to the kid, keeping my voice firm but calm. Hey, buddy, pool time is over. Time to go, Karen exploded. You do not talk to my son like that, she shrieked, stepping between me and the pool like some kind of deranged bodyguard. He is not leaving, and I will not allow you to traumatize him with your cruelty. I pinched the bridge of my nose. This was unbelievable. Lady, I don't know what kind of world you live in where you think you can just steal someone's pool because your kid wants it, but this is not how reality works. I gestured at the gate. Get out. Now, she glared at me, breathing hard, her entire body vibrating with self-righteous fury. Then, as if deciding she had nothing else to say, she spun around, grabbed her kid by the arm, and yanked him out of the pool. She wasn't finished, though. Oh, no. With one last dramatic flourish, she kicked over my lawn chair, grabbed her bag, and stormed toward the gate, screaming obscenities over her shoulder the entire way. She flung it open with unnecessary force, turned on her heel, and pointed a shaking, manicured finger at me. You, she hissed, are a horrible human being. And with that, she stalked away, dragging her sopping wet child behind her, her middle finger raised high like some kind of deranged battle flag. I just stood there, utterly dumbfounded. Then, as the last echoes of her tantrum faded into the distance, I slowly exhaled and muttered to myself, what the actual hell just happened? The next morning, I woke up still fuming from yesterday's disaster. I had never encountered entitlement that thick, that audacious. And yet, as much as I wanted to believe the nightmare was over, a small, nagging voice in the back of my head whispered, people like that don't just walk away. Turns out my gut instinct was spot on. At precisely 8:00 a.m., just as I was enjoying my first sip of coffee, a sharp, rapid pounding on my front door shattered my morning peace. I set my mug down, already knowing exactly who it was. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find Karen, standing on my porch like she had personally been summoned by the forces of entitlement themselves. She was dressed in what I could only assume was her version of a power outfit, a crisp blazer, oversized sunglasses, and a smug expression that made me want to slam the door in her face. Good morning, she said, voice syrupy, sweet, but edged with steel. I crossed my arms. What do you want? She held up a bright yellow slip of paper and shook it in my face. You're in violation of community regulations, she announced, as if she were handing down a royal decree. I stared at her, then at the paper. Community regulations? I repeated. I'm not part of any HOA. Karen's smirk widened, like she had caught me in some grand lie. Actually, she said, folding her arms, you are. As of last year, this neighborhood was incorporated into the Sunny Meadows Homeowners Association, and all properties, including yours, are now subject to its rules. I blinked. That's not how property ownership works. Karen clicked her tongue condescendingly. It's all explained in the documentation, she said, tapping the notice with a manicured finger. Your eyesore of a pool is a nuisance, and after yesterday's incident, it has come to our attention that it is a public safety hazard. A safety hazard. My own personal, perfectly maintained, fully fenced pool was somehow now a threat to public safety. I let out a slow breath, trying to maintain my composure. You trespassed onto my property, let your kid swim in my pool without permission, and now you have the audacity to tell me my pool is a safety hazard? Karen huffed, clearly offended that I hadn't immediately accepted her nonsense. It's not trespassing when there are community amenities in question. I let that one sink in. Community amenities. My private pool. on my private property was now, according to her, a public feature. I was almost impressed by the sheer level of her delusion. She tilted her chin up. Since you've refused to be neighborly, the HOA board has determined that the only reasonable course of action is to reallocate the space for community use. I laughed. Actually laughed. Karen's face twisted in displeasure. Clearly, she hadn't expected anything but immediate submission. "Oh, that's rich," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "So let me get this straight. You want to take my pool, on my property, and just declare it a community feature?" She smiled, as if she were doing me a favor. "It's the fair solution." Fair. I had never wanted to throw someone into a body of water more in my life. "I'll tell you what's fair," I said, stepping forward until we were nearly nose to nose. "Fair is me calling the police and reporting you for trespassing and attempted property theft." Karen scoffed, but I caught the slight flicker of unease in her eyes. "The police?" she echoed, as if the very concept was ridiculous. "They won't do anything. This is a civil matter, and the HOA has legal precedent." I smirked. "Then I suppose we should let them decide." Without breaking eye contact, I pulled out my phone and dialed the local sheriff's office. The moment the call started ringing, Karen snapped. "You are making a huge mistake," she seethed, stepping back, her composure cracking. "I have connections. My husband is on the city council. Do you really think some low-level officer is going to side with you over an established homeowners association?" I raised a brow, letting the dial tone ring for emphasis. Karen's smugness wavered. Just then, the line clicked. "Sheriff Davis speaking." I smiled at Karen as I spoke. "Hi, Sheriff. I have a situation at my property. A woman is attempting to claim ownership of my pool on behalf of an HOA I am not a part of, and I'd like to report trespassing and harassment." Karen's face went pale. Sheriff Davis sighed. "This wouldn't happen to be Karen Whitfield, would it?" Karen sputtered. "You know me, Davis. You're really going to believe this lunatic over a board-certified HOA president?" The sheriff exhaled sharply. "Karen, I've already told you before you can't force HOA rules on properties that aren't legally part of your development. If I have to come down there again, I'm bringing citations." Karen opened and closed her mouth like a malfunctioning robot, her face now a spectacular shade of beet red. I leaned against my doorframe, enjoying the rare sight of an entitled bully realizing they had lost. You just made a very powerful enemy," Karen hissed, jabbing a finger at me. "You will regret this." "Oh, I'm shaking," I deadpanned. "Now get off my property before I start quoting trespassing laws at you." Karen stood there for a moment, trembling with pure, impotent rage. Then, with a dramatic huff, she spun on her heel and stormed away, her designer heels clacking angrily against my driveway. I watched her go, shaking my head. People like her never gave up. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 days. It took 2 days before she struck again. I should have known. I should have expected it. People like Karen don't just slink away in defeat. They don't accept when they're beaten. No, they regroup, they strategize, and then they come back with reinforcements. This time, she brought an entire army of Karens. It started with a noise, not the usual morning sounds of birds or the occasional neighbor's lawnmower. No, this was different. I heard voices, multiple voices, loud, self-important, grating. I stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, and instantly felt my blood pressure spike. There, standing at the edge of my yard, was Karen, flanked by 3 other women who looked like they had all stepped out of the same entitled suburban mom starter pack. Expensive sunglasses, clutching overpriced lattes, exuding an aura of weaponized pettiness. And to top it all off, one of them was holding a clipboard. A clipboard. Oh, this was going to be good. I took a slow sip of my coffee, squinting at the group of trespassers assembled before me. "Morning, ladies," I said, voice flat. Is there a reason you're gathered on my lawn like a pack of well-dressed vultures? Karen stepped forward, smug as ever. We're here on official HOA business. I stared at her. I'm still not part of your HOA. She smiled, that infuriating plastic condescending smile that made my fingers itch to chuck my coffee at her feet. Not yet. I took another slow sip. Explain. The clipboard Karen, who I was now mentally dubbing Karen #2, cleared her throat and lifted her clipboard like it was the holy gospel of suburban law. We have gathered enough signatures to petition for your property to be annexed into the Sunny Meadows Homeowners Association. My eye twitched. Annexed. Like I was some disputed territory and not a private homeowner. You're joking. Karen #3, the shortest one, stepped forward, smiling in a way that screamed passive-aggressive PTA president. Oh, it's very real. We spoke to the local zoning board, and with enough community support, your property can be included under the HOA's jurisdiction. I exhaled sharply through my nose, shaking my head. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. Because I refused to let you trespass and steal my pool, you are now trying to force me into your HOA. Karen #1, the queen herself, beamed like I had just complimented her genius. See? Now you're getting it. I took a deep breath. And what exactly does this HOA plan to do once I'm forcibly included? Karen #2 lifted her clipboard again. First, we'll be implementing aesthetic improvements to bring your property up to Sunny Meadows standards. Your fence will need to be repainted. And, of course, that unsightly pool will need to be properly incorporated into the community recreation area. My grip on my coffee mug tightened. So, just to be absolutely clear, I said, keeping my tone dangerously calm, your plan is to annex my land, force me to follow a bunch of ridiculous rules I never agreed to, and steal my pool anyway? Karen #1 nodded enthusiastically. Yes. See, when you say it like that, it sounds so much simpler. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. I needed to breathe before I did something that would get me arrested. Then, something occurred to me, a slow, creeping realization that made my irritation shift into something darker. They had said they spoke to the zoning board, which meant I took a deliberate step forward, watching as all four Karens instinctively flinched like they expected me to explode. Oh, I said, tilting my head slightly. So, you already filed the petition? Karen #2 lifted her clipboard proudly. We submitted it yesterday. It's already in the approval process. My lips curled into a slow, cold smile. And did you, I continued, read all of the zoning laws before you did that? The flicker of unease on Karen #11's face was priceless. Well, what do you mean? She stammered. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, Karen, the first sighed, relishing this moment. Did you really think I wouldn't do my research? After the last time you tried to pull this stunt? Karen #3 crossed her arms. We followed all the procedures. Oh, I'm sure you think you did, I said, stretching dramatically. But see, there's a tiny little issue. According to local zoning law, if you attempt to forcibly annex a private property into an HOA, the homeowner has the right to counter, file a motion of exemption. Karen #2 blinked rapidly. What? Oh, and that's not all, I added. Since my property predates the Sunny Meadows development, any attempt to annex it without my written consent can be classified as an attempt at illegal land acquisition. Karen #11's face had gone pale. And since you admitted right here that you submitted the paperwork without consulting me, well, I sighed, shaking my head. I suppose I'll just have to file a formal complaint with the zoning board and an attorney. Karen #4, who had been silent until now, suddenly muttered, I told you we should have checked first. Karen #1 whirled on her. Shut up, Denise. I smirked. Karen #2 clutched her clipboard like a lifeline. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, I said. stepping back onto my porch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a legal document to draft and a zoning official to call. Karen hashtag 11's jaw tightened. You're making a huge mistake. I grinned, raising my coffee mug in a mock toast. No, Karen, you are. I shut the door before I could hear whatever indignant nonsense she tried to spew next. Now it was my turn to play. It took me all of 20 minutes to draft the exemption motion and forward it to the local zoning board. It took them even less time to respond with thinly veiled exasperation, confirming that my property could not, under any circumstances, be forcibly annexed into the Sunny Meadows HOA, which meant that Karen's little plan had just imploded spectacularly. And yet, somehow, she still wasn't done. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab my mail, half expecting some new level of HOA idiocy waiting for me. And sure enough, there it was, a massive, professionally printed sign, staked directly into my front lawn. Coming soon, Sunny Meadows Community Recreation Center. I froze, my morning coffee turning to ice in my veins. Karen had not given up. I took a slow, controlled breath before ripping the sign out of the ground. There was no way she could actually believe this would work, right? Wrong. Because not 5 minutes later, I heard the telltale clatter of heels approaching. I turned just in time to see Karen herself, striding down my driveway like she owned the place, her hair perfectly styled, and her expression oozing smugness. "I see you got the announcement," she chirped, as if we were old friends chatting about a neighborhood block party and not an ongoing war for my land. I held up the sign. "You want to explain this?" She beamed, like she had been waiting for this moment. "Oh, I thought you'd be thrilled," she said, clasping her hands together. "Since we had some legal complications with annexing your property, the board decided on a different approach." My jaw clenched. "Which is?" Karen gestured dramatically to my front yard. "We're repurposing your space for community enhancement." I stared at her. "You mean stealing my property?" She actually rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic." I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand down my face. "Karen, the first swear to whatever deity is listening, you cannot legally claim my property." Her lips curved into a smirk. "Oh, but we can." And that's when she pulled out a stack of papers. I took one look at the letterhead and felt my eye twitch. It was from the city planning office. With a flourish, Karen handed it to me. "We've submitted a community beautification request," she announced. "Since your yard is an untapped space with recreational potential, we've proposed that it be reclassified as a public use area." My fingers tightened around the document. "That's not how property law works." Karen tilted her head. "All fake innocence." "Oh, but according to this little clause," she tapped at a section of text, "if a proposal for public development is deemed beneficial to the majority of the community, the city can authorize reallocation of underutilized spaces." I took a deep, deep breath, because if I didn't, I was going to scream. "And, let me guess," I said tightly, "you and your Karen council are the ones who decided my property was underutilized?" She nodded enthusiastically. "We submitted a survey to the residents of Sunny Meadows, and 87% of respondents agreed that your property should be reclassified for the greater good." I laughed, actually laughed. A deep, borderline hysterical laugh. "Oh, that's cute," I said. "You held a neighborhood poll in a neighborhood I'm not even a part of, and decided that my land should be taken?" Karen shrugged. "It's democracy." It took everything in me not to launch into an expletive-riddled tirade right then and there. Instead, I smiled. Because I had her. "Did you submit this to the city already?" I asked casually. Karen nodded, practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh yes. They should be reviewing it any day now." "Perfect," I said, ripping the document in half right in front of her. Karen's gasp was loud enough to wake the dead. "What are you doing?" she screeched. I dropped the shredded paper onto the ground, letting the pieces scatter at her feet. See, Karen, I already spoke to the city zoning office yesterday, I said smoothly. Turns out, they'd already flagged your little beautification proposal as fraudulent, since my land isn't designated for communal repurposing. Karen's face drained of color. That's not possible. We filed it properly. Oh, you filed it, I agreed. But you see, Karen, you left a paper trail of lies. I took great pleasure in watching her expression implode as I listed her errors. 1. You falsified a petition by only surveying HOA members, excluding the actual legal property owners of the area. 2. You claimed my land was vacant, which it very clearly isn't. 3. You submitted your paperwork without my signature, which is required for any property reassignment. So, I finished, crossing my arms. Not only is your little scheme dead on arrival, but the city planning board is now investigating the HOA for fraudulent filings. Karen looked like she was about to explode. You have no idea who you're messing with, she spat. My husband is on the city council, I grinned. Oh, I know. That's why I forwarded the city planning office your husband's signature on the document, just in case they needed to verify who was backing this fraud. Karen's mouth dropped open. You can't. Oh, but I can, I said. And I did. I took a step closer, leaning in slightly. And, Karen, if you try one more stunt like this, I will personally take legal action against you and the entire Sunny Meadows HOA. She stared at me, breathing hard, her face flushed with rage and panic. And then, with a wordless scream, she whirled around and stormed off, her heels clicking so hard against my pavement that I thought they might crack. I watched her go, arms crossed, utterly victorious. Karen had played her final card, and she had lost spectacularly. Now, all that was left to do was wait for the fallout. I thought that was the end of it. After all, Karen had been publicly humiliated. Her fraudulent petition had not only been rejected, but it had also triggered a formal investigation into the HOA. She had stormed off my property in a fit of pure rage, her last-ditch power move crumbling into dust right before her perfectly manicured fingers. It should have been over, but people like Karen don't know how to quit, which is how I found myself waking up at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of a jackhammer tearing into my driveway. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. I groggily stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, trying to make sense of the mechanical roar outside my window. But the second I pulled back the curtains, my exhaustion evaporated like mist under a blowtorch. A construction crew, a real legitimate crew in neon vests and hard hats, was currently ripping up my driveway. I didn't even grab shoes. I stormed out the front door, heart pounding, my mind trying to catch up to the absurdity unfolding before me. Hey, what the hell do you think YOURE doing? The nearest worker, a burly guy holding a clipboard, barely looked up from his paperwork. Repaving the community roadway, he grunted. I blinked. What? This isn't a community road. This is my driveway. Another worker, operating the jackhammer, briefly paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Not according to our work order. My fists clenched. What work order? The clipboard guy finally sighed and handed me a printed document. And the moment my eyes landed on the signature at the bottom, I saw red. Karen, of course. According to the paperwork, this wasn't my driveway. It was an unclaimed municipal extension that had been graciously adopted by the HOA for road improvement. Karen had submitted the request on behalf of the neighborhood, claiming my land was abandoned easement space. And the city? They'd approved it without even verifying the claim. Oh, she was playing dirty now. I took a deep breath. Listen, I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. This document is fraudulent. This is my private driveway. This is my property. If you don't stop immediately, you will be held liable for trespassing and destruction of property. Clipboard guy frowned, We were contracted by the HOA, yeah? I snapped. And I'm contracting you to get the hell off my property. He hesitated, then looked at his crew. Shut it down, he called. Something's not right here. The jackhammer fell silent. The other workers exchanged confused glances as I stormed back inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed the city planning office. The woman who answered sounded half asleep. Municipal Services. How can I? This is James Miller, I cut in, my voice sharp. I need to speak to the head of zoning right now. She yawned. Sir, it's barely 5 in the... They're tearing up my driveway because someone fraudulently claimed it as a municipal road, and I have proof. That woke her up. 15 minutes later, I was on the phone with Daniel Grayson, head of municipal zoning, and he was furious. You're telling me the HOA filed a false work order? Yes. I sent him photos of the construction crew, the half-demolished driveway, and Karen's fraudulent signature. And if you don't fix this, I'm suing the city for negligence. Grayson cursed under his breath. Give me 20 minutes. I hung up, fists still shaking with adrenaline. 20 minutes later, a city truck rolled up, and out stepped Grayson himself, a wiry man in a wrinkled button-down who looked very, very angry. He took one look at the half-ruined driveway and let out a slow, murderous sigh. Son of a... I assume this isn't legal? I asked dryly. He turned to the construction crew, his expression dark. Who gave you this work order? Clipboard guy gulped. HOA president, Karen Whitfield. Grayson pinched the bridge of his nose like he was getting a migraine. This isn't a municipal road. It's private property. Clipboard guy went pale. We didn't know. Well, now you do, I said, crossing my arms. So fix it. The crew wasted no time. The jackhammer operator looked relieved as they started reversing the damage, repouring the cement they had destroyed. Grayson, meanwhile, pulled out his phone. I need to make a call. To who? To Karen. I didn't hear the full conversation, but judging by Grayson's increasingly pissed-off expression, it wasn't going well for her. When he finally hung up, he turned back to me with a grim smile. She's in deep trouble. How deep? He smirked. Oh, let's just say, the city council is not happy about their own member's wife falsifying work orders. She's looking at heavy fines, HOA violations, and possibly even criminal charges for fraud. My eyebrows shot up. Criminal? Grayson nodded. Filing false municipal documents is a serious offense, and since her husband is on the council, it's about to become very public. A slow, satisfied grin spread across my face. That's fantastic news. Oh, and one more thing. I raised a brow. Yeah? Grayson clapped a hand on my shoulder. She just lost all credibility with the city. If she so much as breathes near another fraudulent zoning request, she's done. I let out a breath. I didn't realize I was holding. Finally, Karen had dug her own grave. By the time the construction crew finished, my driveway looked better than it had before. And as I stood there, watching them pack up, I allowed myself to enjoy something I hadn't felt in a long time. Victory. Because Karen, she had just lost the one thing she valued more than her ridiculous sense of entitlement. Her power. I should have known Karen wouldn't just slink away in disgrace. No, people like her don't accept defeat. They fester, they plot. And when they come back, it's always with something worse. And sure enough, 3 days after the driveway disaster, I woke up to the smell of smoke. For one heart-stopping second, I thought my house was on fire. I bolted out of bed, adrenaline surging through my veins, and yanked open my bedroom window. Thick, gray smoke billowed from my backyard. I sprinted downstairs, nearly tripping over myself, and threw open the back door only to be hit by a wave of heat. My fence was on fire. Flames crawled up the wooden planks, devouring the dry timber like a starving beast. Embers popped and crackled, leaping into the air, dangerously close to my shed and my pool equipment. A spark in the wrong place, and I wouldn't just be dealing with a fence fire. I'd be watching half my property explode. Shit. I grabbed the nearest hose, cranked it on, and blasted the fire with everything I had. Water sizzled against the burning wood, steam rising in thick clouds. My hands were shaking as I fought to contain the flames, my heart slamming against my ribs. It took 5 agonizing minutes before I got the fire under control. By the time the flames finally died, my fence was half collapsed, charred beyond recognition. I stood there, panting, soaked in sweat and water, my mind still trying to catch up to what had just happened. Then I spotted it, a single, unmistakable clue lying just beyond the ruined fence, a discarded matchbook. I bent down, picking it up with shaking fingers. It was from a local steakhouse, the same one Karen had bragged about having a VIP membership to. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. Someone had set my fence on fire, and I had a damn good guess who. My hands curled into fists. I wasn't just angry, I was done. I stalked back inside, barely registering the soot and water I was tracking across the floor, and grabbed my phone. Sheriff Davis picked up on the second ring. "Miller? What's going on?" "My fence was set on fire last night," I said, my voice like gravel and ice. "And I think I know who did it." A pause, then a sharp inhale. "You serious?" "Dead serious." I flipped the matchbook between my fingers. I found evidence. Davis cursed under his breath. "I'll send someone out." "Don't bother." I grabbed my truck keys. "I'm coming to you." By the time I reached the sheriff's office, my rage was a living thing, clawing at my ribs. Davis met me in the lobby, his expression grim. "Let's see it." I handed him the matchbook. He studied it, flipping it over in his hands, then sighed. "This isn't exactly a smoking gun." I gritted my teeth. "Come on, Davis. You know exactly who would pull this stunt." His jaw tightened. "Yeah, but knowing and proving are two different things." I exhaled sharply. "So what? She gets away with arson?" "Not necessarily." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Davis leaned in slightly. "See? After that fraudulent work order fiasco, the city started digging into the HOA's finances. And guess what?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "They found some very interesting discrepancies." My heart leapt. "How bad?" "Bad enough that Karen and the entire HOA board are under formal investigation for embezzlement." For the first time that morning, I smiled. Davis smirked. "That's right. They've been skimming money from HOA fees for years. Thousands of dollars vanished into maintenance costs that never actually happened." I let out a low whistle. "So what happens now?" "Oh, the county's going to have a field day with this," Davis said. "And if we can tie her to your fence fire, that's felony arson on top of financial crimes." I crossed my arms. "And how do we prove it?" Davis's smirk widened. "Simple. We check her security cameras." I stared. Then I started laughing, because of course, Karen, in her infinite paranoia, had cameras on every inch of her property. And if she or someone acting on her behalf had set that fire, there was a good chance she caught herself on film. "Oh," I said, grinning like the devil himself. "This is going to be fun." That afternoon, Davis and I drove down to Karen's McMansion of doom. She opened the door with a glare that could strip paint. "What do you want?" she snapped. Davis smiled pleasantly. "Karen, we're conducting an investigation into a suspected arson. Mind if we take a look at your security footage?" Karen's face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "I don't see. The thing is," Davis continued, his voice smooth as silk, "if you didn't have anything to do with it, then your footage will clear you, right?" Karen's hands clenched. And if you say no," Davis added, tilting his head, "that's gonna look suspicious." For a glorious moment, Karen stood there, visibly panicking. Then, finally, she caved. "Fine," she spat, storming back inside. "Do whatever you want." Davis and I exchanged a glance. because we both knew exactly what that meant. Karen had just screwed herself over, and I was about to watch it happen in real time. Karen led us into her house with all the enthusiasm of a death row inmate. Walking to the chair, she was nervous, very nervous, and I was loving every second of it. Davis and I stepped into her immaculately curated living room, white furniture, gaudy gold accents, and enough scented candles to trigger a migraine. Karen stomped over to a built-in cabinet, yanking it open to reveal a sleek home security system. Here, she snapped, scrolling aggressively through the footage. You can see for yourself, no one left my property that night. I glanced at Davis, and he gave me a slow, knowing smirk. Karen had just made a fatal mistake. She was so desperate to clear herself that she forgot the golden rule of covering up a crime. If you delete evidence, it looks worse. Davis folded his arms. Go ahead and pull up the footage from midnight to 5 a.m. Karen's fingers froze over the controls. Why that time? She asked way too quickly. Oh, Davis said, rocking on his heels, because that's the window where the fire was started. A bead of sweat formed at Karen's perfectly sculpted hairline. I sighed dramatically. Karen, if you're innocent, this should be easy. Just pull it up. Her mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. Then, with visible reluctance, she clicked on the requested time frame. A black screen stared back at us. Davis let out a low whistle. Well, would you look at that? Missing footage. Karen blanched. I don't know what happened. Maybe the cameras glitched, or I cut in, maybe you erased it? Karen sputtered, her whole body going rigid. That is a baseless accusation. Davis pulled out a notepad, flipping it open with agonizing slowness. You do know, he said casually, that tampering with security footage during an active arson investigation is a felony, right? Karen visibly flinched. I know. Tell me, Karen, I said, stepping closer. Did you delete the footage yourself, or did you get someone else to do it? Her nostrils flared. I did no such thing. Davis hummed, jotting something down. Well, the good news is, deleted footage can be recovered, especially when someone's too stupid to actually wipe the hard drive. He flashed Karen a predatory grin. You didn't think about that, did you? Her face twisted in panic. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Karen whirled on me, her voice shrill. You did this to me. I laughed outright. Oh, sure, Karen. I hacked into your house, erased your own security footage, and then set fire to my own damn fence just to frame you. Makes total sense. Davis snapped his notebook shut. Karen Whitfield, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for questioning. Karen lost it. This is a witch hunt, she screeched. I have rights. I'll call my lawyer. You do that, Davis said, unfazed. But in the meantime, we're seizing your security system for forensic recovery. He nodded to his deputy, who had just entered. Bag it. Karen let out an inhuman noise, clutching her chest like she was about to faint from the sheer injustice of it all. The deputy ignored her theatrics and disconnected the security drive, placing it carefully into an evidence bag. Karen watched, horrified, as her last line of defense disappeared before her eyes. I hope you have a damn good lawyer, I said cheerfully. Karen turned on me with the fury of a cornered beast. This isn't over, she spat. I'll ruin you. I leaned in just a little, lowering my voice. Karen, you already did that to yourself. Davis patted my shoulder. All right, Miller, let's let the legal system do its thing. We turned to leave, but not before I took one last look at Karen, standing amidst her perfectly curated life, watching it all collapse around her. And damn, it was glorious. Later that night, I sat on my newly repaired porch, sipping a well-earned beer as the news came in. Karen had been formally charged with obstruction of justice and was now a prime suspect in an ongoing financial crimes investigation. The HOA board was in full meltdown mode. Members were resigning left and right, throwing each other under the bus, trying to save their own skins. Lawsuits were piling up. And best of all, the city had officially severed ties with Sunny Meadows HOA, which meant their power, their influence, their grip on the neighborhood, gone. I took another sip of beer, feeling a level of satisfaction I hadn't known was possible. Karen had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she was the one who lost it all, and I didn't even have to lift a finger.